In this video, we're going to look at how we factorize expressions like this one here, where we've got brackets, we've got negative fractional powers, again, how we actually approach this. Now, in order to build up to a question like this, we are going to go back to basics, because what you'll find is actually those GCSE factorizing questions, the method for those are exactly the same as for these here. Okay, so the one we're going to start with, which might seem quite straightforward, is actually 6x take 3. I just want to talk through the standard process. So step 1 for factorizing, you've got to figure out what is your highest common factor. Okay, so if we got 6x and negative 3, our highest common factor would be 3. Okay, so you'd write a 3 here. I'm just going to indicate that this is our highest common factor. Okay, just for future reference. Now, once you've got your highest common factor, you open your bracket. Then you ask yourselves, what do you multiply by 3 in order to get to 6x? Well, that would be 2x. And then what do you multiply by 3 to get to negative 3? Well, that would be negative 1. Okay, and then you will close your bracket. However, I do just want to think about things in a slightly different way. Okay, and that is how we could have got these numbers in the bracket without thinking about it in terms of multiplication and actually thinking about a direct calculation that could get us our bracket. So I'm just going to rub this out here. Okay, so essentially the question I'm asking myself is, how do I get from my highest common factor, which is 3, to the 6x by multiplication? So I'm just going to write that down here. 3 multiplied by something is equal to 6x. Okay, now in order to figure out what this something here is, what I need to do is I need to divide by 3, okay, to get it on its own. So that something is going to be equal to 6x divided by 3. So therefore you would get 2x once that's fully simplified. Okay, let's do the same with the negative 3. Okay, so how do I get from my highest common factor 3 to negative 3? By multiplication. Okay, so essentially 3 times something is equal to negative 3. Okay, so if I was to divide by 3, my something would be negative 3 over 3. So it's going to come out as negative 1. So we end up with the same answer as before, but we're thinking about factorizing as division. Okay, because if you're factoring out 3, essentially what you're doing is you are dividing every term in the expression by 3. Let's try and apply this to a slightly trickier scenario. Okay, so the one we're going to do is this one here. So you can see we've got brackets now. However, no negative or fractional powers yet. Okay, and we've got 2 terms. This is term number 1, so this is sort of like the 6x from before. And then this here is term number 2, so that's sort of like the negative 3 from before. So we need to identify what is our highest common factor. Well, if we look at both terms, clearly x plus 2 is in both of them. So that means x plus 2 is going to be part of my highest common factor. Now, we usually use the lower power. The lower power of x plus 2 would be squared. So I'm going to put a squared on this bracket here. Now, there is one other thing we have to consider, and that is the numbers multiplying the bracket. So we've got a 3 and a negative 15. Well, what's the highest common factor of 3 and negative 15? Well, it's 3. So that means 3 also has to be multiplying into our highest common factor. So I'm going to write it at the front. So I've now successfully figured out what my highest common factor is. And I'm going to indicate once again that this is my highest common factor. So relating it back to the previous question, this is essentially the equivalent of the 3. It just looks a little bit more complicated. Now, once we've got our highest common factor, okay, we open our brackets. And I'm just going to use square brackets just because it's going to get a little bit cluttered. With brackets just to reduce confusion. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide this term here and this term here by our highest common factor. So I'm going to write out both of those calculations. So let's write out for the first term. We'd have 3 lots of x plus 2 squared. And we're going to divide that by our highest common factor, which is also 3 multiplied by x plus 2 squared, like that. Okay, so let's simplify that. Well, we've got something divided by itself, so this is going to come out as 1. Therefore, the first term in our bracket is going to be 1, like that. Now, let's do our next term. Okay, so our next term is the negative 15 lots of x plus 2 cubed. And we are going to divide that by our highest common factor, okay, which is the 3 lots of x plus 2 squared. Now let's divide. So we got negative 15 divided by 3. So that's going to be negative 5. And then if we look at our brackets, well, the base is the same. It's x plus 2 in both cases. We're dividing. So we need to subtract our powers. Our powers, we need to do 3, subtract 2. Okay, so we're going to end up with a power of 1. So I'd write x plus 2. And it would be to the power of 1 like that. And this is going to be the second term in my square brackets. So I'm now going to write this over here. So negative 5, lots of x plus 2. And it's to the power of 1. I don't need to write that power in like that. What we're going to do next is simplify our square brackets. Okay, so I'm just going to take this off. So I'm going to write the first part out like this. And then in my square brackets, we got the 1. And then a negative 5 is multiplying these other brackets here. So let's expand. So negative 5 times x is negative 5x. And then we've got negative 5 times positive 2. So that's going to be negative 10 like that. And we're going to close our square brackets. Then we can simplify those brackets a bit further. And actually at this point, I'm now going to use regular parentheses. Okay, like that. We got 1 subtract 10. So that's going to be negative 9. And then we've also got the negative 5x like that. Now we could leave our answer like that. However, in that bracket that I just simplified, we have a common factor of negative 1. So I can factor that out. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the front by negative 1. And then the x plus 2 squared stays the same. But now in that second bracket, we factored out negative 1. So if we divide both terms by negative 1, they're going to become positive. So we'd have 9 plus 5x like that. Okay, let's look at the hardest type of question we can get then. Okay, which is when we have our fractional powers like we've got here. So step 1, we need to figure out what is our highest common factor. Now, if we look at both terms, clearly the 2x subtract 5 is present in both of them. And usually when we factorize, we pick our lower power. So our powers are positive a half and negative a half. So we're going to pick negative a half like that. Okay. Now let's also look at the numbers multiplying the brackets. So we got the 6 and the 9. Well, what's the highest common factor of 6 and 9? Well, it's 3. Okay, and then that is our complete highest common factor. So I'm just going to indicate that here, that this is the HCF. Then once we've got our highest common factor, we open our brackets. So we're going to write square brackets because it's going to get a little bit messy. And what I'm going to do is now divide both of my original terms in the expression I was asked to factorize by our highest common factor. So let's write our calculations out. So it's this term here divided by our highest common factor, which is over here. So 3 lots of 2x subtract 5 to the negative a half. Now let's calculate this. So we got 6 divided by 3. So that's going to be 2. And then our bracket parts are exactly the same and the exact same power. So they are just going to cancel out. Okay, so we're actually just left with 2. So therefore, the first term in our square brackets is just going to be 2. So it's already looking a little bit neater. Now let's do our second term. Okay, so this term here, and we're going to divide that by our highest common factor. So 9 lots of 2x subtract 5 to the power of a half divided by our highest common factor. Okay, so that's 3 lots of 2x subtract 5 to the negative a half. So let's go through. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now the base number of our powers are the same. We've got 2x subtract 5 in both cases, so I'm going to write that here. And then because we're dividing, we need to subtract our powers. So the calculation I need to do is positive a half subtract negative half. Okay, so that's going to become addition. So a half plus a half is 1. So therefore the power is going to be 1 here. Okay, and this is going to be the second term in my square brackets. Okay, so let's write it in. We would have plus 3 lots of 2x subtract 5. And I don't need to write power of 1. If it came out as power of 2, of course, I would need to write it. But because it's power of 1, I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, now what we're going to do next is, because we completed our square brackets, let's simplify them. So I'm just going to take this off here. So the highest common factor, we're not going to change that. So I'm just going to write that in. And then inside my square brackets, let's expand this bracket here. So we've got 3 times 2x, which is 6x, and then 3 times negative 5, which is negative 15, like that. And I'm going to close my square brackets. Now, what I'm going to do is simplify my square brackets because I see some common factors. Sorry, I see some like terms in there. And we got power of negative a half. And then inside my square brackets, I'm going to put regular parentheses once it's fully simplified. We've got 2 subtract 15, so that's going to be negative 13. And then it's plus 6x, like that. Okay, and that's fully factorized. Now, where would you be expected to do this at A level? Well, if you've just differentiated something using the product rule, you might get a scenario that looks a bit like this, and you might be expected to write it in a specific form, which involves factorizing.